So welcome everybody to the Federal Contractor Briefing on winning cost plus contracts. We appreciate that you are here. Joining me, as you can see, is Keith Hasty. He is out of Chicago. Say hello, Keith.
Hey, how is everyone this morning?
Awesome. Absolutely. I'm Dave Lowe. I'm a special advisor with Keystone Advisors. And a real quick disclaimer, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency and is provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. All participation in this briefing is voluntary, and any engagement by government personnel is not an indication of endorsement of or commitment to purchase from any vendor, including us or you. So we do have some folks that will pop in from time to time from the government, so we appreciate them being here. A little bit about Keystone Advisors. Give us a dose of how you came to be, because this is an interesting combination with what you do. You have 30 years of experience in manufacturing. Tell us about the manufacturing part with DoD, and then how you wound up getting it into the other side of the house with the CPA and the accounting firm.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Keystone, well, we own a company, a manufacturing company, which is a defense contractor, and we do a lot of defense work for the Department of Air Force and the Navy. A lot of cost-plus contracts in providing packaging systems for armament, such as Hellfire missile, some of the other missile systems that are used by the Army. We started that company about 30 years ago, and both myself and my wife are CPAs. We had then taken our expertise from the manufacturing, since we have been doing so much defense work, and we started, my wife started a CPA firm, helping other contracting companies, defense contractors, to with their accounting needs that they have in order to do business in the defense area. As I mentioned before, Keystone, which is an affiliate of our manufacturing company, is a licensed CPA firm. We've been in the federal practice of assisting federal agencies and defense contractors for over 7 years now. We have 25 professionals, which includes CPAs, IT people, which have CISA certifications and CISM certifications. Our headquarters are in Chicago, Illinois, but we handle projects all around the country. We do projects in the DC area, in DC and Virginia. We also do work in Michigan, Ohio, and we also are working on programs right now in the Seattle, Washington area, and soon to be in the Seattle area also.
Awesome.
We have a top secret facility clearance, our CPA firm does, and the CPA firm is a woman and minority-owned firm. Part of what we do also too is that we're a GSA and a Seaport E contract holder, so that allows us access to different professional service type of contracts. And then as of August of this past year, we just became HubZone certified.
Which is important, and as you look at the intersection here is really interesting, because you have experience as a DoD contractor dealing with cost plus contracts for many years, and then looking at what the audits are for you, what are the requirements for you, and then being able to take that both practically as a defense contractor as well as a CPA firm, and that provides you a significant amount of insight, and a unique insight when it comes to a lot of CPA firms don't have that kind of insight, right? So with that, I want to ask a question of why everybody is here, and with that, I'm here because. Tell us why you're here. And that could be because this whole cost plus contracts thing is new to you. I want to make sure I priced my proposal correctly. I lost a cost plus bid, and I want to know why. That's always a nice thing to know. I have a cost plus contract currently, or I have a problem with a cost plus contract and need help. Let us know what you got there, and we'll make sure that we address specific needs while we're doing this, as well as supply you with the follow-up information that makes good sense. So if we share that, so everybody knows you're not alone. Not a whole lot of people have a problem with help, but everybody else has different issues here. So we'll make sure we're going to address some of those things. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about cost plus contracts, what they are, some of the federal contracting trends that we see, and be asking you about that as well. Common issues and problems, hot button triggers for DCAA auditors, which is really important if you have a cost plus contract. Plus, we'll help your company compete and win and give you some services available from Keystone for that purpose. Real quick on the briefing controls, you open up the side, that side panel with that little red arrow, and you can ask questions. You can also, if you called in on the phone, make sure that you enter your audio pin so we can unmute you. And with that, you can also email us questions that we'd like, that if you'd like. So with that, also, if you like the way that we're dressed or like the way we look, you can make us look bigger. You can make us disappear altogether, and you just grab that little handle there and move that bar. The other part that we have here is we have supporting documents. There's 5 supporting documents that are in here. There's different parts of the FAR that we'll be talking about, as well as an article on cost plus contracting and some of the specifics that we'll be talking about today that Keystone is involved with, and what cost plus contracts are, the different flavors there are. So we'll be talking about those as well. So feel free to download those. And with that, we'll open up another poll real quick. And this one is, I expect to need assistance for pre-award accounting system audit to develop cost and pricing data for cost plus contract to be audited on a closeout of a cost plus contract, to need a protest a cost plus award, or to defend a protest for a cost plus award. Both of those important things if you have already won. As you know, protests today are the way that things are being done. It used to be that you wouldn't do that because you didn't like to irritate people, but nowadays it seems like that's a regular operation. So with that, we'll give you another about 10 seconds to do that. Appreciate you all giving us information on that, because that'll help us as well. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, folks, thank you very much. And just so we know, there are folks that have cost plus contracts that do need some of those that help with the protests, but the rest of these are right in the wheelhouse of what we're talking about today, and we'll get back to here. So what are cost plus contracts? I would love to tell you that this is some kind of great insight for you. This was pulled right out of Wikipedia. So because this is a pretty generic topic when it comes to cost plus, also called reimbursement contracts, and it's where you essentially are paid for what you're owed plus allowable expenses and an allowance for profit. So with that in mind, there are a few flavors for cost plus contracts. So let's talk about these, Keith. Give us what these are and what the differences are of these.
You know, the first two, cost plus incentive fees and cost plus award fees, are really the government's attempt to make sure that the contractor is bought in. It allows a contractor to charge to the government on a contract their cost, which includes all of the direct cost, which is materials, labor, direct cost, and the indirect cost to an objective, some objective for performance for the government. And then after you charge your cost through to there, then there's a fee that's attached to your cost, either an award fee or a incentive fee that really incentivize the contractor to perform. Cost plus fixed fee contract is those type of contracts where you are providing to the government the same, your cost, plus you allow a fee that's negotiated at the beginning of the contract. Cost or cost sharing is basically where you're sharing the cost of any particular objective that you have. And then time and materials, of course, that's where you are charging them for your time, the actual time that your employees or you spend on an objective, and the materials that you spend. So all of these different cost plus type contracts.
Yep. So with that, you can also, the supporting documents that we just talked about, the FAR, there's contract types and articles. There's actually what we're going about into. This is hard to read from where you are, but the cost plus types of contracts are right there in the download capability of the handouts that you have. So grab those handouts if you would like some more information on the cost plus those types of contracts. But essentially what Keith just said, the 5 are determined here, and it shows the objectives that the government is after. We're not going to go deep into each one because but just know that that's in there with the types of contracts and what the objectives are in the government, what they're trying to protect from. So you're free to download those. But as far as what are the fundamental requirements of this, and with the DCAA compliant accounting system, let's talk about these requirements, because this is where we start to see some of the ways that you can get yourself in trouble, and also the requirements that the government are looking at from you to be able to participate even in the bid itself, right, Keith?
That's correct. Yeah, the first thing is that you have to have a DCAA compliant accounting system. And there's normally, and this is for all contracts, that you must have that. They will come in and they will do DCA will do a review of your systems to determine if your accounting system meets the minimum requirements by the FAR in order to participate in those type of contracts. Those requirements, of course, are things such as the abilities to track cost, direct cost to the particular contract that you're working on, the abilities to allocate overhead cost to that objective also, too, based upon some basis. And once they determine that you have a compliant accounting system, then you're able to participate in those type of contracts. The next thing that you really need is that after you're able to participate, you have to submit a certification of the accuracy of your cost and your pricing data that you submitted. And that certification is, as it says, it's you certifying that your costs are true and actual based upon your belief and knowledge at the time. This is an area where a lot of folks can get themselves in trouble because, if you're not accurate with that, it is an official certification. Then after you submit your cost and pricing data, the contracting officer will normally go through a process of reviewing that, and they will determine a negotiation position that they are going to have for your contract. And then they'll start the negotiation process to negotiate with you about the price that they're going to give you for that contract, or they're going to negotiate with you for that contract. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, you go about performing under the contract, and there's reporting requirements while you're performing under the contract. And then, lastly, of course, is the closeout audit of the contracts for contracts over $25 million, where you're reconciling what is owed to you or what you owe to the government based upon your actual cost.
And when we get to that point of the reconciliation of funds, what is your experience there with what happens at that? Is it a hard line? Is it a pretty easy process? How does that work?
Well, especially for larger contracts, larger contracts will definitely cause a closeout audit. There is where you really, if you've been doing the proper things with cost allocations, with assignment of direct and indirect costs to a contract, it really shouldn't be that difficult to do. All you're doing is presenting the data for the contract itself, receipts, allocations of labor costs to the particular objective. But in a lot of cases, what you'll find is that there will be some question cost, and there'll be some costs that the auditors will say, well, this really shouldn't have been assigned to the contract. Therefore, it can cause some problems in terms of you owing the government money, or if you have not accrued all of the expenses, they can owe you additional money on those contracts.
So, as far as who makes the decision on the cost plus options, this is really driven by contracting. The contracting officer is responsible for all contracting type of materials and what it is that they're after, right? So they shall use cost reimbursement contracts only when. So this is where you start to see the government kind of pushing back against cost plus as what they're kind of leaning towards. Used to be that they leaned a lot towards this, and we're going to ask a question in a few minutes of what everybody else sees out there. But this is the requirement for that, and we do see federal contracting trends being in you do have agencies that kind of lend themselves towards this, and these are the things that we've seen with the Navy and the Air Force. A lot of T&M for professional services, engineering, accounting, auditing, surveying, and things like that. This is what we were talking about yesterday, Keith, is what we're seeing out there within cost plus as a contract. So we'd like to know what you see out there, what the types of contracts that you see, and whether you're seeing them at all, right? So if you haven't been seeing them at all, pop that into the questions pane and let us know that. But tell us what you see as far as the contracts that you're either bidding on or you see coming down the pipe. That way we can make sure we're addressing specific areas. But a lot of those look like cost plus fixed fee, Keith, as you mentioned as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of time and material as well, and you can answer more than once, so you're not restricted to one. But let us know what you see, and I think we're seeing kind of the same types of things. So this is what everybody's seeing here, Keith. Any surprise here for you?
Oh, a large portion of cost plus fixed fee. The government is very into this cost plus fixed fee. Incentive and award fees are hard to monitor. Right. They're hard to determine when you've hit objectives, and so the government goes with the fixed fees, the cost plus fixed fees, and then of course time and material, which is another large portion of the government's procurement strategy.
So as you look at this, and you have a lot of experience here, so as you look at this, tell us some of the common issues that you have seen, and the things that wind up, and we'll talk about some of the hot buttons in a minute, but some of the common issues with folks that are trying to get into the cost plus space. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, the first largest one, I guess, is the compliant accounting system.
Right.
A lot of companies and individuals have accounting systems, but being compliant with DCAA requirements is where a lot of companies run into trouble. The ability to be able to allocate cost to a particular cost objective, and to be able to know what cost is allowable and unallowable costs. So what we're finding is that timekeeping systems, for example, that cannot track employees' time as it relates to the cleanse that associated with the contract is a very important issue. Even when you back up to things like a manual, an accounting manual that instructs accounting staff on how to account for these costs, it's very important, and we're finding that doesn't exist in a lot of organizations. So they cause problems for themselves when they have DCAA to do the audit, and then they rule that the accounting system is not compliant. First thing. Ability to be able to certify complete and accuracy of data submitted. This process is really a process that requires that the company really understands its cost and understands what direct cost is associated with this contract, and then what indirect cost is associated with its contract. And how do you basically come up with what's reasonable and fair for this particular contract? And then, of course, track cost to a particular objective. We talked a little bit about that. And then identify unallowable cost. The last area, which I think is really important, is the pools, the indirect cost pools. Being able to allocate those cost pools to a particular contract. For example, general and administrative expenses. How do you allocate the quality control manager's cost to a contract? What's the method that you use? Engineering pools. How do you allocate engineering time that is spent on a particular contract. Some of it may be direct, but some of your engineering costs may be indirect. And then how do you go about allocating that to a particular contract?
So let's talk about that for just a minute. How does that get determined, as you've seen it within your organization? How did that get determined where it didn't cause problems?
Well, if you have a accounting manual or accounting policy that says, here's how we will allocate costs to every objective, all of our business objectives, as long as it's fair and reasonable, DCAA and you can explain it, why you're allocating it in that method, then you won't have a problem with it. The problem is when you're doing different things for different contracts. You know, for your commercial contracts, you're doing one method of allocation, and then for your government contracts, you're doing a different method. That's when you run into trouble.
And it's the government requires a lot of things that commercial doesn't, right? So there is overhead that's associated that can be applied, and we see this all the time. And but being able to identify it, I think what you said is really key, is that if it's written down in a manual, and this is the process that you follow, having those procedures in place helps DCAA then look at your procedures reflected against what they're seeing in their audit, right? Yeah. And whether or not it lines up with what you're saying you're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, very important, very key. Mm-hmm. So then finally we get to the place of negotiating fair and reasonable, and that whole reasonable world really depends on what happens between the two parties, right?
Well, you know, reasonable is also what happens in the marketplace also. You know, for example, you know, if you have an engineer who's being paid $1 million a year for a particular project, the government would rule that as being an unreasonable cost.
Right. I don't understand. It seems reasonable.
Yeah. So, you know, reasonable is both market-based, and reasonable is based upon your past practices. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't 1 year go from having a you know, where you have overhead rates, unless something happens dramatically, you have overhead rates of 1.5 times labor, and then the next year have it 12 times labor. You know, something would have had to have occurred that you have to be able to explain what happened with the organization.
That makes good sense. I do have a couple questions. You want to answer a couple questions real quick, because there was one here that I did see.
Sure.
Let's see. Explain the $750,000 in the DCAA compliant systems. Can we bid if it's under $750,000?
Yeah. You know, smaller contracts, the value of the contracts really will affect whether or not you are subject to an audit or not. They classify certain dollar value contracts as either high risk or low risk contracts. When the contract is under $1 million, you will fall into a low risk category if you meet certain other criteria. But when you get above, from $1 million to $5 million, it becomes a little bit more complicated to be classified as a low-risk contract. But over $100 million, you start to be classified in the high-risk category.
Gotcha. And that's referring to this particular slide right there. And we have some other questions too that we will get to for sure in just a minute. Because what we'd like to do is talk about right now is some of the hot button audit triggers. Nobody likes to be audited, number one. And number two, nobody likes to be called out on the carpet for something that they missed in an audit, right? So let's talk about some of the keys. I think we just mentioned one, which is contract size. In dealing with, you know, the larger it is, the more scrutiny you may have, right?
That's correct. That's correct. And, you know, even with larger contracts, if you've done a number of contracts in the past years and you've had audits of those contracts and there were no limited amount of question cost in there, these high-risk contracts could be classified as low-risk contracts. So the key is to make sure that your accounting system is adequate and that you have properly separate out allowable versus unallowable cost, and that as you pass these audits, you move your contracts from high risk to low risk, and eliminate the needs to have regular audits by DCAA.
Which is what we all like, because audits are overhead, right?
Exactly.
Straight into that, and we'll get into some other things. All right, so your biggest concern, what is your biggest concern with dealing with these cost plus contracts? Is it pricing them right? Is it the compliance piece? Everybody should check that, by the way, and everybody should check the next one too, which is the DCAA audit, or system compliance, or other certifications or compliance issues. Check that one if you have a specific concern that we're not addressing here, especially because we do want to make sure we address those with you. Some of these concerns will be taken offline, but we'll make sure that we get those. So let us know what your biggest concern is, and we will we'll make sure that we get information specific to that to you after we're done. And we'll give you another 10 seconds here. We appreciate you guys doing this, by the way, because it helps everybody. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and wow, people are still doing it. And that's it. Okay, so we'll share those out. There you go. So everybody knows you're not alone. There's a lot of concerns in different areas that we have. All right. So now we'll go back and we'll get to those questions specifically to what you have, and we have a bunch of them, Keith. So I'm gonna start asking these. If there's some folks that we're not sure how to get to the handouts at the bottom side of your screen, it's actually down here somewhere. It'll say handouts, and you can just click and download those. That's how you do that. And Lois can see those now. Edward said he doesn't see a whole lot in his industry yet. All I see is BPAs and letters of intent. Never heard of Cost Plus, which is why I signed up for the webinar. Based in Puerto Rico. Nice, Marcos. I know that oftentimes at this time of year we wish we were where you are. Does your DCAA accounting system audit ever expire? That's a great question. Go ahead, Keith.
Normally, as you're doing contracts, the audit of the systems is taking place during the audit also. So when you first bid on a contract, they come in to make sure it's compliant. And as they proceed with audits, they also do a review of your system too while they're doing the audit. So they'll ask you questions about, explain to me how do you allocate cost to a particular cost objective? Are you continuing to track your costs in the same way? So while it technically does not expire, the auditor is still probing into your system as they're doing the audit to make sure that you're still compliant and that you're still following those procedures and that you have in your manual.
Awesome. And it gets back to your procedures and having things well documented, right?
That's correct. Exactly.
Yep. Mandeep is asking, how can we get certification of accurate price and costing data?
Okay. The certification is a certification that is done by the contractor. You physically certify that your costing data is accurate. And that's based upon invoices and tracking information that you've done in your accounting system, that you're certifying that that data is accurate. You are the one certifying it, and the government is relying upon your certification to come up with the reimbursement that it's going to do to reimburse you for your costs.
Which is why you get audited.
That's
right?
correct. Exactly.
Yep. So certification is on you as the contractor to certify. Accuracy is on you, and the audit is what verifies that you, number one, know what you're doing, and number two, whether it becomes a high risk or a low risk situation as you continue to perform those, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Is QuickBooks a compliant accounting system per DCAA?
You know, I hear this question all the time, and QuickBooks says that they are compliant. It's not your accounting tools that you use that make it compliant. It's the things that surround the tools. For example, QuickBooks does allow you to collect cost based upon a cost objective, but it may not allow you, unless you design it properly, it may not allow you to collect that data based upon the CLIN, down to the CLIN number. Mm. So while it can be, all systems can be compliant, it's how you design it so that it will be compliant is where the issue is at. And
again, the processes that you surround that system with so that it can be clearly identified and explained.
That's correct. You know, yep. The allocation of those pools, the setting up of those pools, and the setting up of your chart of accounts in QuickBooks, you know, has special requirements to do that, to set up the chart of accounts. So while a lot of software will claim they're compliant, how you set it up and how you run it, that software, is more important than the software itself.
Yep. Can a company get, this is from Atchut. I hope I didn't just butcher that terribly. Can a company get a DCAA audit without an intent of an award from the government?
You know, they will not, DCAA will not come out and certify your system, nor will they do any forward pricing agreements with you without some agency sponsoring it. So, and even then, it can be difficult because they're so far backlogged. Mm-hmm. But you do need a government agency sponsoring it with some sort of contractual agreement.
And they are backed up.
That's correct.
We've heard that across the board with different agencies. In fact, you know, our friends at Department of Energy, right?
That's correct.
Well, we will skate around that particular one right there for the moment.
And it's not just DOD that's the issue. As you mentioned, other agencies have these cost-plus contracts, and they have requirements also. Yep. And they're turning to commercial accounting firms to do some of these audits. We're going to see a lot. That's going to be a trend in the future, yep, where firms like Keystone will be actually doing the audits as opposed to DCAA doing those audits.
Yeah, setting up the parameters, and obviously, since it's been done for so long, it's pretty understandable what DCAA is looking for. We'll talk about that too as well in just a minute. Do you discuss the relationship between your cost accounting system and any EVM requirements? Stephen asked that question. That's a great question. That's outside my expertise area.
Yeah, you know, that earned value system that the government has set up is a unique system, and your cost accounting system plays a major role in your scoring of that. So it's important. You know, your cost accounting system is important not just only for this audit purpose, but it's also important in how you run your business, you know, and how you're charging through costs to particular contracts, and whether those contracts are profitable or not. That's very important too.
And Blaze is asking a question. Accounting systems that are both CAS and commercially viable, examples of companies. Great question. You have an answer for that?
Well, again, not endorsing any accounting system per se. The system itself is not what will make your system compliable and will allow you to pass a DCAA review. It is all of the procedures that are put around the system. It is the organization of the system itself, like I mentioned, chart of account organization, how you classify allowable versus unallowable costs, and how you recognize the allowable versus unallowable costs. Those other issues are issues that affect whether or not a system is compliant.
Excellent. And that goes back to taking a look at what you have, doing a gap analysis, figuring out where the problems are, right? We'll talk about that as well.
Exactly.
All right, we have a question from Cassie. We do a lot of subcontracting work for prime contractors on a cost plus fixed fee contracts. Are we subject to DCAA audits? Great question, Cassie.
Normally the prime is responsible for that. And if you're a significant sub, though, you can be subject to those audits. But it's normally the prime responsible for ensuring that the cost that is submitted through that reimbursement is actual, because they're submitting the certification of accuracy in their data.
Right. That's usually
right.
Key word. So let's see. Did that one? Where can I get the latest FSN scales data from?
You know what? What we have to do is we can. Why don't you take his email information and we can get him a link to that.
We'll get you a link to that.
Yep.
How extensive? This is from Greg. How extensive is the documentation required to comply with DCAA audit? Will explanations of allocation methods plus system design presentation be adequate?
Well, it can be as simple as you want to, like any system. Depending upon the contract itself, depending upon the level of staff that you have, you can design it as simple as here's how we do things, or it can be as complicated with all kind of internal control information placed within the system. It will depend upon the level of contracting that you're doing with the federal government. At some point in time, you don't want to overcomplicate things if you're only doing a small amount of contracting with the government. But if you have a lot of contracts, a lot of transactions running in there, then you want to put in as many internal control safeties as you can to ensure that the proper data is going to that cost allocation for that contract.
Yep. And I'm going to do one more. Actually, I'll answer one of these. Do the audit backlog, will the government still award a contract without the conduct of the audit? I would say yes, they do.
They do. Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean you're not going to get audited, though.
That's correct.
And to what extent do these arrangements apply to non-American contractors? We're a Canadian company which has made some $50,000 in sales to a federal body. That's underneath threshold, as you mentioned, Keith, as well. And
wouldn't that probably be all?
You're not going to have that as a particular problem, and it's probably not that's probably just a fixed fee contract anyway, not a cost plus, most likely. It could be wrong, but that's usually the way it is. There's some more questions, and we will get to those and make sure if you have any additional questions, feel free to ask those, and we'll make sure we do get to those and respond to those. We'll include those if it's not particular to your company. We'll include those in a follow-up document, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So a lot of this revolves around a couple of things for your organization to be able to understand where your exposure is. Talk about some of the things that you do, Keith, for cost plus services for federal contractors. This is an on-site team session. Who does that include when you're talking about getting these people together? And if you're talking about a one-day blitz, at least to take a look at what's happening, tell us about what that looks like.
Yeah, that would normally include, from the contractor's perspective, the person in charge of the pricing, cost and pricing for the contract, the accounting people who are responsible for the accounting for government contracting, and the contract person, the person who's bidding on the project. And what we'll do is excuse me, I'm sorry. What we'll do is that we'll come in, our team will come in for an on-site visit for one day. We'll sit down and meet with these individuals, and we'll go through a contract review with them, looking at the requirements of the cost plus contract. Then we'll also, as part of that one-day review, we'll do an accounting system review. seeing if the current accounting system is compliant. And from that, we'll come up with a gap analysis in terms of what we need to do in terms of getting their system compliant. And that's all part of this. We use the same procedures that DCAA does in terms of walking through your accounting systems. We'll develop recommendations for the client, the contractor, and then come up with a next step action plan for the contractor also.
So that's a one-day thing, and one of the questions is, what does that cost to do this type of thing, so that you can find out what it'll take. Some of these are recommendations that you would then implement, depending on the complexity of that. So what does it cost to do this kind of thing for a single day? I think it's plus travel, obviously, but it's $19.50 plus travel, right?
Yep, $19.50 plus travel, and from there we'll be able to give you the next step action plans that you need in order to be compliant with any DCA cost plus contract that you may have.
And there's additional things that you can do after that. That's part of the next step action plan, right? So, and what I love is your expertise as you do your gap analysis of real life being audited yourself. So, being able to see what happens in other industries from an accounting standpoint, a CPA firm standpoint, but also the experience that you have for what you have done as a federal contractor. So with that, we'll ask this is great, and I need help pricing my proposals. I need help with an upcoming audit. If you think that one's coming because you have one. I need help reducing my exposure. This could be part of a problem that you may know you have you suspect that you have. I need help with another contracting compliance issue, or I'd like to discuss teaming with Keystone on a project, because guess what? Keystone does that as well. We'll be glad to help out in many ways as a hub zone company. And we'll talk about a few things in just a minute of keeping you out of hot water and making sure that that you're doing what's necessary to do that. And we'll give you another about 10 seconds. You can finish that up. Just let us know what you need from us, and we will make sure that we are jumping on that as soon as we're done. And there, 5, 4, 3, 2, and people are still doing it. All right, and that's it. So there you go. 50% need help pricing the proposals. No shock there, right, Keith?
Yeah, that is one of the major areas where there can be a lot of concerns with, because your pricing of your proposal has an effect on your business, both competitiveness and whether or not you will make money off of it.
That's right. Or if you win at all, right?
Right.
You price yourself right out of it. So staying out of hot water, this is my favorite of all the slides, because this helps everybody be able to pay attention to what's happening. First things first is be proactive. Make sure you're checking on your documentation, that you're doing what's necessary up front, not behind the curve, because behind the curve always gets us in trouble, right? So price right, negotiate well. That's something that you definitely want to do. Performing your risk assessment as part of your review is also important, and probably with the exception of actually getting that DCAA audit, maintaining your accounting system, right, Keith? That's probably one of the most important things that you can do, and the accuracy of the data that you submit, because those are the places that you really get yourself in trouble, right?
That's correct. Yep, exactly.
Yep. So in tracking your costs properly and making sure that you're allocating properly. There's for your engineering, your administrative, and your other costs that you're piling in on there too, and making sure that they are allowable. Those are the pieces that will help keep you out of hot water, and that's what everybody wants. As far as our federal contracting information, you can find us. We do have a GSA schedule. There's our DUNS, our cage code, Seaport E contract, hub zone, woman-owned, and obviously a small business embedded in that as well. Some folks indicated that you'd like to discuss teaming. Love to be able to do that with you as well, and that can help everybody, right? That's where we're all in this together. So with that, you're going to get a follow-up email with the presentation, the questions and answers. We have more of them coming in. We'll try to get to those before we jump off here if we can. And if not, it'll be included in that Q&A document. The supporting documents that you have that you can download right now will also be there. Links to the regulations as well as Keystone's capabilities for your review. And with that, we are right at 45 minutes here, Keith. So we want to say thank you to everybody. We're gonna hit a last few questions here, and then we'll make sure we get there. If a small business set aside, can I rely on larger subcontractor defense companies to support the accounting system? All right. If it's a small business set aside, can I rely on a larger subcontractor, the defense company, to support the accounting system? I don't think so.
Well, first of all, the small business has to perform 51% of the work itself for the contract. Now, if you're involved in a mentor protege program with a large business, then you can have them help you in that area with the accounting part of it. That's part of the services that they can provide to you. And I would suggest that you try to, if you're going to do that with a large business, you try and get involved with a mentor protege program with that business.
That's always a great idea, the mentor protege. But I don't think you can pass on your responsibility for accounting to a sub.
No, you are ultimately responsible for that,
right?
For the accounting for that.
So Stephen is asking, is that 19,050? No, it's 19,000. It's 1,950. It's 1,950. So yes, it's 1,950 for us to come plus the travel for that. And Blaze is saying you can only download the ACA article, nothing else. Well, if that's the case, I don't understand that because they're all there, but we'll make sure that that is part of the follow-up documentation so you have access to all of that. Let's see. There's a couple more here. Some of these are very specific, so we'll get to those. And we have somebody that raised their hand. Let's see. Let's do this. Blaze, do you have a question? And let's see if I can unmute Gary. Gary? We have Gary that has a question, has his hand raised. Peter. Is that Gary?
Yeah, I hit the button by mistake. So.
You hit button by mistake. All right, Gary. Thanks. How about Peter Mest? Peter, you there? He's not picking up. How about Blaze? Blaze, you back? I'm not even sure Blaze is there. I know that we got some emails back. All right. So there's a couple other questions. If you have any other ones, please feel free to submit those to govsupport@keystoneadv.com, and we will make sure we answer those. There's key information right there. You can also pick up the phone and call us if you need us, and we will look forward to providing that. We really appreciate you folks joining us today. It was great. A lot of interaction. We appreciate that always. Keith, any parting comments? And thanks for the folks for being here.
Yeah, well, I'd like to thank everyone for being with us also too today, and we look forward to any questions that you have in the future. Just reach out to me or Dave, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible.
We certainly will. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of the week. Thanks, folks.